This is the second episode, meeting and speaking with Patrick Blessinger, who's the Director and Chief Scientist, as well as the founder of International Higher Education Teaching and Learning Association, or HETL. So I'd like to welcome Patrick Blessinger to the program. How are you this morning?
I'm very good. Thank you for asking, Lisa, and thank you for inviting me to this podcast.
So, and that brings me to questions about democracy. According to a Swedish researcher here at the in Göteborg or Gothenburg, where I live, and at our university, his name is Lindberg. He's got this incredible research that he's done on democracy, and he is basically saying that democracy is in decline, and 70% of the world's population is living under autocracy, which means then how and what is taught in many universities, colleges and schools is constantly scrutinized. How can this trend be changed? Because I know you're also interested in the word democratization in higher education.
Yeah. And in fact, I produced a book, and edited book, I think it was about 10 years ago, with Routledge on democratizing higher education. That's really where I developed my interest in it. I have a very keen interest in the whole idea of democracy. I believe very strongly in it. I've studied economics at the undergraduate and graduate level. I have a very keen interest in taught it also, and have a very keen interest in it. And every day I become a stronger and stronger believer, in the value of democracy, as a form of governance, and in democratic principles, right? That can be applied to any sphere of life, not just governance, and so, I talk about that in the book I produced and in other articles. When you contacted me, a couple of months ago, that really motivated me to want to, you had mentioned that report, and I read it. I went to the website, I read it, and I produced an article that's going to, on that whole topic, together with a couple of co-authors, that's going to come out in University World News, probably in January. Yeah. And and I can even, send it to you if you're interested in looking at it. And I'll do that today. And it was a joy to write. So, that publication that you mentioned, was it VDEM, I think? The VDEM, that was a critical, source of information in helping to write that article. So, we are living in a time where, I would say probably 50 years ago, let's say, around World War II, the good guys and the bad guys were pretty clear, right? The forces of evil, let's say, I don't mean that in a religious way. I just mean like fascism, right? And and dictatorships, and despots. Okay, that was pretty clear. We know who they were. If you go back to World War II, Mussolini, Hitler, etc. Okay, and the good guys, that was pretty clear also. Well, since then, it's become maybe a little harder to tell. Maybe a little bit more convoluted, right? Because we have this whole phenomenon now of autocratic democracies. And it seems like an oxymoron, right? It seems like a contradiction in terms. And that show, and we speak about this in the article that I'll send you, but it shows how some leaders now are becoming more sophisticated, because the old sort of like fascist regimes and absolute dictatorships, despots, those forms of extreme forms of autocracies are becoming more and more untenable, right? More difficult because we live in such a globalized world. Everyone is being scrutinized, right? We know what is going on pretty much in every country because television stations now are global. We have satellite technologies that track everything. And so, someone becoming like a fascist Mussolini, I think is, very more and more difficult, to do. So, people who or leaders who may have sort of a bent in that area or a psychology where they want to, do that, they have to do that in more sophisticated ways. And maybe that is why this whole form of, autocratic democracies we've seen that, develop over years because they're coming up with more sophisticated ways to still become authoritarian, okay, but claim to be democratic, okay. And of course, they are oxymorons, they are contradiction in terms, because democratic principles, the authoritarian principles and democratic principles just do not are like oil and water, right? They don't mix very well. Okay, but we're seeing, and I think it's I don't know if it's a disturbing trend or perhaps it could be a trend. Maybe this is a stage that some countries have to go through before they get to more developed and authentic democratic societies, right? I mean, even a country like the United States, which has long been considered, a bastion of democracy, having really, I think, with the Declaration of Independence in 70, that whole, which really sparked the democratic revolution, in my opinion, modern democratic revolution, that coincided with the Industrial Revolution that, got started in Britain. We've gone through an evolution.
Absolutely.
Every society, every democratic society goes through an evolution, what I call democratic evolution, as it learns more about what it means to be a better democracy, right? A healthier democracy, a more equal and equitable democracy, a more just democracy based on human rights. So in our country, for example, we've had several movements over the years. We've had to fight a civil war to abolish slavery. We've had to have a civil rights movement. We have had a women's rights movement and other human rights and civil rights movements. So we've evolved, and so that's true, I think, of every country. So maybe, the optimist in me, says that hopefully, this is a stage in their movement. And as people get maybe even just a small taste of a freedom here and there, a small taste of human rights, and they will want more, And I think we're starting to see this in China, for example, now that they've, acquired Hong Kong. We see more protest breaking out, in China. And so as the people there get more of a taste, of what it means to live in a free society based on human rights and justice, maybe, they will start to speak up more.
So it's like some countries, they're going through growing pains.
Yeah.
So do you have any concerns about democratization in higher education? Do you believe that there are forces that are kind of working against democracy in higher education?
Well, the principles of democracy can play out, in all different ways, at all different levels. Democratization means different things to different people. Of course, one way is to relate it just to political governance, but it goes way beyond that. John Dewey, who was a famous, American educational philosopher about 100 years ago, he said that democracy, in its essence, is an associated way of living. It's a way of life, right? And so it permeates every aspect of what we do and how we form our societies and how we relate to people, to our neighbors, in our schools, how we structure our school systems are from, elementary to higher education. Now, with respect to higher education, one way you can look at democratization is, this whole idea, part and parcel of this whole idea of inclusion and widening access, and giving everyone, every citizen who wants the opportunity, to participate in higher education in one way or another, the opportunity to do that, right? And so how we've done that in the US is develop a very diversified system of higher education institutions. Starting about 100 years ago, around 1910, I think the first community college was in Joliet, Illinois. And since then, there's been this whole community college movement that has really, mushroomed over the last 100 years. Now there are community colleges in every state, all across the nation. I don't know the exact number, but it's a great many, at least several hundred, maybe thousands. And that is sort of an entryway. So even if someone, doesn't want to go to university, may not be prepared academically for university, there are other options, for that individual. It could be community college, it could be a trade school, a technical institute, a business, program, or business school, exactly. And all of this is, at one level, it has to do with the democratic idea that everyone should be included. Everyone should have the opportunity to make the most of his or her life, right? But it also is very important for economic development, right? Because in any very diversified economy, you don't just have physicists and and medical doctors and lawyers, right? But you have plumbers and electricians and all sorts of people, right? All sorts of professions and trades and crafts that are necessary for the healthy functioning and growth and development of a democratic society, right? And so I think that at its heart, I think that's that's what it means. That to me, that's a key part of democratization, that you're opening up opportunities for everyone. And as a result, we've seen Martin Troe, who was a professor at University of California in Berkeley years ago. I guess I forget when it was, maybe 30 or 40 years ago, probably closer to 40 or 50. He developed a model. He observed these trends. Of course, he focused his research just on US, but we see similar trends going on in other countries now also. But he observed the trend of how, if you go back like 100 years, not many people went to university.
No.
In fact, not many people even graduated from high school. Maybe going back 100 years in the US, for example, and I wrote an article on this, all the statistics are in there, but the University World News article. But like at the turn of the century, 1900, thereabouts, 1910, you probably only had maybe 10% of people graduating from high school. It wasn't until after World War II. After World War II changed everything. It changed the entire world. It was a reset point in human history and world history. It changed the rules of the game of how we think about democracy, how democracies are structured, the social contract between government and its citizens, et cetera. And then you fast forward to the 60s and the Cultural Revolution that spread across many countries around the world. And you saw a lot of reforms take place. Then you saw, a growing emphasis on basic education. And then we saw the high school graduation rate, well, at least in the US. I'm not sure what it was like in other countries at the time, but you'd have to go up and, fast forward to like 1970, like about 50 years ago, to see, high school graduations rates go up to like 70 or 80, about 70%, right? Now today, in today's world, we'd say, oh, 70%, that's way too low. That's not acceptable, right? We want something closer to 90 or 95%, but it's all part of the evolution, of society and democratic society in particular. And that's one of the reasons why I'm such a strong believer in democratic societies, because unlike probably every other form of governance, a democracy, if it's an authentic democracy, not a sham democracy, but an authentic one based on authentic democratic principles, it's self-correcting. It corrects itself, right? Because ultimately the people are in charge. Self-rule. It's based on the fundamental concept of self-rule, right? So democratization, that's, to me, that's the process of these democratic principles finding their way into every aspect of society, so that universities are no longer, on the whole, anyhow, considered elite, where only the brightest, only the top 10% of the high school graduating classes are going to university. But now they're open to more and more people coming out of high school. I mean, even if you didn't, at almost all community colleges, over here, for example, even if you didn't graduate from high school, and if you find yourself in your 30s and 40s, and then you decide, okay, I do want to go back to university now, you have an opportunity to do that, right? You can go to a community college. Right. You can take a year of courses to earn your high school diploma, right? Then once you've met those basic requirements, then you go into an authentic higher ed curriculum, with academic rigor, et cetera. And then if you graduate from community college, you can transfer to a 4-year university. And so, you allow people the opportunity. Not everyone will take advantage of that opportunity, right? The choice is theirs, but at least the structure and the systems and the opportunity is there for those who want to take advantage of it.
So are the community colleges, are they free of charge?
Some are. It depends, because those are local colleges that are usually or almost always administered either by the state at the state level or at the local city or county level. Some are free of charge or virtually free of charge, may have a perfunctory, fee that, isn't very much, or they may, have very small, typically they're very, very small fees. We're talking maybe for a course, maybe a few $100s, to take a course, because we don't want, especially at the community college level, we don't want, finances or inability to pay to become yet another barrier, right, to one improving himself or herself, right? Maybe transitioning. And that's very important for a healthy democracy and a healthy economic system, because, careers are always changing. Jobs that were plentiful 50 years ago are no longer plentiful, right? Jobs that were even plentiful 10 years ago may not be plentiful. So people, find themselves in a situation where they have to continually retool themselves, re-educate themselves, re-skill themselves, right? And of course they could do that themselves. There are many means to do that now. There are many different platforms, from MIT's courseware to Khan Academy, there are just thousands of websites if you wanted to sort of self-educate yourself. But not everyone wants to self-educate, or may not be, inclined to want to do that. So you need to, having a structure of a very diversified higher education. And when I mean higher education, I kind of use that term very, very broadly to include community colleges, even trade schools, so maybe I should use the term post-secondary.
What do you think? Providing inclusive and equitable education to all, is it possible?
Well, fortunately, with equitable and inclusive education, there's a difference, of course, between equality and equity, right? Equality to do with uniform or equal outcomes, right? And it's very difficult, maybe impossible, to, no matter what your social policies are, even for very egalitarian societies, right? And I know the Scandinavian countries are very egalitarian. I spent several years, living in one, but I think it's very difficult to maybe even impossible to guarantee equal outcomes for everyone. Okay. However, and so now there's this movement to think more in terms of equity. Equity is just outcomes. Okay. And just outcomes has to do with, do people have the opportunity, if they want to take advantage of it, right? Are social and economic systems there and government programs, et cetera, do they allow people to improve themselves, right? Does society give people opportunities for improvement, self-improvement in terms of education and reskilling and changing jobs or changing careers, right? And so, I'm just a believer that, in a diverse, I believe in a diverse, just like I believe in a diverse democracy and a pluralistic democracy. I think post-secondary education should be diverse also and pluralistic, to reflect, the same democratic ideals and principles that we see in society. So of course that would include, research universities, right? Ones that you and I, work at. But it should also include, opportunities for education for other people who may not be interested in, attending, a research university. But I think it's important to give, everyone an opportunity to improve themselves, right? And what better way to do that through education, right? Whether it's a research university or a trade school or a community college, or maybe, just going online. And, MIT in 2001, I believe, they put all of their courses online for free, right? They got a huge grant, right? And from a nonprofit foundation, and they agreed. The faculty agreed, and the president agreed, and the board of trustees said, "Yeah, we'll do this." And they took all of the courses, right, and they put them online for free. And I can imagine some people at the time saying, "Oh, you shouldn't do that. No one will want to attend MIT if you do that." But that never happened, right? Their brand is still as strong as it ever was, even more so, right? And it's only benefited them. It hasn't diminished them in any way. And so we're seeing more and more universities now follow suit with edX, which is a Harvard program, and Coursera, and other digital platforms. And so now there's so much opportunity for people to get educated and to educate themselves. It just takes motivation, and that's it comes down to that. How do you motivate people to do that? Yeah.
So thinking about the 17 UN Sustainable Development Goals, is there one goal that you consider especially important?
Well, you could take an argument could be made where you could take these 17 and put them in the clusters and say, okay, this one's is important, but it really depends on this other one, right? And so what you would end up with, just doing a quick analysis of them, you could end up with maybe 4, right? 3 or 4 that were the most fundamental, that if you focused on those, that it would have a ripple effect that would impact all the other ones. And for me, they would be number 4, education, quality education and lifelong learning. They would be number 8, economic development. Okay. It would be number 13, climate action, and number 16, peace and justice, right? If, if we really made success in implementing those 4 and meeting all the targets of those 4, I think it would have a huge impact on all 17.
Yes, yes. Is there anything you would like to add to the conversation that I haven't mentioned?
Well, I think all of your questions are great, and especially with the research that your university is doing, the VDEM project on democracy. I would encourage everyone to go to that website to read the publication. It's really cutting edge research on democracy and where the world is right now in terms of democracy. The analysis and the findings are spot on, and I think that's that's important. I would encourage people to do that so that they're aware. They're aware of what's going on in the world. No, there's really, I don't think there's anything else, I can add. The questions were great, and I really appreciate you inviting me to the podcast, and it's been a pleasure talking with you.
It's been an absolute fabulous time. Thank you so much for your time, and happy holidays.
Yes, happy holidays. Yes, I'm looking forward to the break.
And you've been listening to the podcast Sånt är livet i Sverige, or That's Life in Sweden, with me, Liisa Uusimaki. I want to take this opportunity to wish you all happy holidays, and I look forward to catching up with you when we return in 2023. Meanwhile, take care of yourself and each other's. Bye for now.